Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending our warmest welcome to our distinguished guest of honor and speaker, no other than our very own Dr. Diosdado M. San Antonio.
Maraming salamat, Attorney Chris. Good afternoon, fellow members of the SEAMEO INNOTECH community and fellow educators. I understand there are those watching online. I've been assigned to, of course, by our Madam Mahal Leia Rabago, our Center Director. It really touched me that when I was assigned to do this talk before my retirement from INNOTECH. So brace up, future retirees. You should be doing this also. So the talk is on fostering transparency, ethics, and accountability in delivering basic education services. And for today, the objectives would be to describe the prevailing contextual challenges facing basic education. Some of you are very much aware of this. We'll also discuss, actually, the heart of the talk, the T governance advocacy, which refers to transparency, ethics, and accountability. When we were formulating the acronyms, our madam actually does not feel very good about having acronyms, but in DepEd, if you don't know how to formulate acronyms, you'll not be promoted. So we have to create something. When we were designing this, we told my staff, those who don't like to take tea can eat. But we opted to just do T. And then the next phase of the talk will be on some leadership approaches that support the transparency, ethical, and accountable governance mechanisms. And finally, I'll provide some key points to remember in becoming a T leader. So realities, these words, also acronyms, we read from newspapers, describing realities in the 21st century. Of course, the most popular is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And then we heard there should be 2 Ds. Mabuti na lang hindi 3. Baka Diosdado yung isa. Disruption and diversity added. And somebody even said, 2 authors said it's turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. 2 na. And also wrapped for being rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. And lately, bunny. I heard the former manager of LDMO say that the word is bunny, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. In one forum I attended, I heard a Malaysian co-member of a panel claim that actually it's all about chaos in our midst. So that's our world. That has been the world ever since, but it's becoming more challenging for us to survive in the 21st century. The other reference that I always mention when I'm given the task to provide context for the problems of educators is the World Development Report for 2018 that focused on education, which mentions that the learning crisis, the first time this was introduced in the books, in that particular report, is attributed to 3 dimensions: poor learning outcomes themselves, and then the immediate causes are children arriving unprepared to learn, teachers often lacking the skills or motivation to teach effectively, inputs that often fail to reach classrooms to affect learning, and poor management and governance often undermine schooling quality. And the final dimension is deeper systemic causes. So actually, this is the framework that mentions that learning happens only when the learners are ready, when the teachers are also competent and committed, when the school managers are mindful of the need for learning to happen, and when the school inputs are also in place. So the old normal, I would like to believe most of these descriptors are no longer in existence in basic education now. In our public school system, I joined in 1985. Many of you were not yet being considered by your parents. We had DepEd officials who make decisions intuitively. Kung ano lang yung inspiration ng Holy Spirit, yun na yung decision nila. SDM on paper only, meaning if you ask, do you have school-based management being implemented in your school, they would put out the list of members of the advisory school council or the school governance council, but they don't actually meet. They just have this organization on paper. And of course, there is this culture in DepEd that the boss is in charge. Nobody moves until the boss says, we're going to do something. Everybody waits. The culture of subservience, wastefulness, because priorities are not very clear. ICT, especially during the time when it was first introduced, I was a principal then when the DepEd started in collaboration with DTI, distributing computer packages. We would not want the learners to touch them. We said, the learners may destroy the computers, they have to be used in the offices, perhaps to expedite preparation of reports. No time to supervise because there's an overwhelming responsibility for school managers, liquidation of MOOEs, and a lot of other things. And then misconduct is common in the sense that like for example, when I joined Calabarzon in 2013, I had to, as a disciplining authority, I was overwhelmed with all sorts of complaints from everybody handling discipline problems. In fact, I had one principal dismissed because like she employed her son as a driver on a casual basis instead of a job order basis. Wrong information from support staff. Mediocre learning, still the complaint now. And schools were not very safe. I have one favorite story about this. When I was SDS, a teacher was abducted by a suitor, brought to the house, then the teacher was killed, and the suitor committed suicide. A tragedy in Ligao City during the years when I was superintendent. That kind of unsafeness, lack of safety in schools. Data are inaccurate because I think it's only now that DepEd has been able to put together certain databases that are more reliable and accurate. During our time, the reports are invented by people who prepared them. So if you ask, what's your prevalence of non-readers? They would say, just take siguro from the sky and then make the report. And palakasan was common and information was not actually known to people. And so as mentioned by Attorney Chris earlier, we came up with an advocacy for transparency, ethics, and accountability. The first forum, because we had to organize a big forum where all principals and learning leaders in Calabarzon were in attendance. We came up with 12 things to do for T-governance. Chinky Tan and Francis Kong, who volunteered to offer their services as resource persons during that forum for free, said, you have to come up with something that could be remembered. Do not just list things that you want to do when you claim you are a key governance advocate. So we went back to our room and we met after the forum and we came up with a very, very memorable acronym, Scouters Rack, which has been my way of telling the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, I'm an advocate of scouting. So when I came up with an acronym for an advocacy that I really pushed so hard, it was Scouters Rack, which is essentially strengthening the merit system, creating and nurturing productive partnerships, opening channels of communication, upholding the norms of conduct for public officials, taking active part in monitoring and supervising teaching learning activities, enabling every school-age child and youth to benefit from high-quality basic education services, recognizing and scaling up research-enabled best practices of exemplary performance, sustaining systemic push for higher levels of SDM implementation. And the RAC is rendering regular and accurate financial reports on everything, optimizing the utilization of ICT, conserving water, energy, and other resources, and keeping schools and offices safe and eco-friendly. So essentially, the advocacy revolves around these 12 things captured in an acronym, Scouters RAC. The details I will not discuss because I know time is of the essence, but I'm flashing the details. When do you say you are strengthening the merit system? The ranking procedures are open. I remember just a few stories about this. When I was a young assistant superintendent, a long time ago, I had to process applications for the position of a principal in our division. There were 10 vacancies. There were like 120 applicants. I had to be very creative. So what I did was the documentary assessment of the evaluation. It was not empowered or enabled by ICT, but it was a very transparent way. I said, exchange your documents with your seatmates and then score the document of your seatmate. Let the owner of the document validate the scores, and then once we know the scores, tell us, we will announce. We had Manila papers around the room where the meeting was held, and then the top 25, we said, will proceed to the interview and the examination. So we only had to do the process, the whole thing for 25 instead of the like 120-something applicants. That was the case, and I think in the offices I served, this was adopted, the way a ranking procedure is undertaken. Then applicants are known for promoting those that are known for outstanding performance instead of other considerations, implementing policies that are consistent in crediting points. Kasi in some divisions, there are different ways to score, appreciate accomplishments of candidates, and then we discourage the practice of getting recommendations from other stakeholders. This was our way of saying, and I really believe that if the DepEd, or if, I'm talking about DepEd as the context because this is about our case in Calabarzon. We said, the moment you secure an endorsement from anybody else, you're telling me, when I was the regional director, that you are not confident that you can compete in a very fair system. So you're telling me you're not good, you should be put at the bottom of my choices when I make the recommendation for those who will be promoted. And then I minimize the use of the so-called wide latitude of discretion. We know that the appointing authority has discretion, but I minimize that. I really made sure that the one on top is always most likely the one to be appointed, but I know that there are instances that I can also invoke somebody else should be here because of other things. And I would explain that to the candidate that ended up number one in the assessment. For the C, it's about partnerships, so summits, activities of LGUs, we participate, we recognize the stakeholders, we maintain good rapport with PTA, we capacitate staff and stakeholders on how we can, deal closely with our stakeholders. And then opening communication channels, so regular meetings, providing suggestion boxes, using various media to disseminate information, responding quickly to questions, concerns from the field or rank and file, sharing email address and telephone numbers with clients. I think I'm the only one in DepEd who could boast that my number is known to anybody because I always told myself, anyway, the phone is paid by DepEd, so people should be able to reach me. I'm a firm believer that the more you are able to get feedback from the ground, the better are your decisions. Because if you ask people to report what is the status of the people on the ground, they will always sanitize the report. So you end up being misled by the actual situations happening. Upholding norms of conduct for public officials, they are actually provided in the law, RA 6713 ba yan? There are 8 of them. These are the enumerations. But I always highlight the fact that if it's very difficult to implement all the 8, just be sure that you... hindi ko pa alam to. You lead modest life. This one, simple living. I just tell people, if you live simply, you'll not be tempted to be corrupt. You'll not be tempted to do shortcuts on certain things because after all, you are able to manage your resources properly without having to to demonstrate that you are somebody already. I remember my short story about this was when we got promoted, there were 33 of us in Camarines Sur promoted on mass promotion as principals. The next MANCOM meeting, many of my fellow newly promoted principals came with, dati sa time namin, jeepneys from Cavite, the owner-type jeep. They said, we are now principals. We should behave like principals. I really did not feel that a car is necessary for me to be a very good principal. So I still continued with my own practice of commuting. And it had nothing to do with commuting or owning a car. Of course, I respect those who who are able to really buy their own vehicles. But personally, I'm happy being an ordinary human being. Anyway, taking active part in instructional supervision, so we have to monitor and supervise classroom observation of teaching, technical assistance on effective instructional practices, promoting or fostering innovative pedagogies, even monitoring assessment practices and using these results so that we can provide interventions are the things we identified as steps, concrete actions, so that we can become the governance advocates. Enabling every learner to benefit is conducting community mapping surveys, strengthen Balik Eskwela program, creating child-friendly school environment, enforcing no collection policy, organizing co- and extracurricular activities. We had one initiative, I don't know if it's still being done in Calabarzon, where we recognize the barangays who claim that there's no one of school age who is not enrolled. So we recognize every year the barangays with 0 out-of-school children and youth during my time when I was regional director as our contribution for making sure that everybody in the community is provided basic education services. Recognizing and scaling up research-enabled best practices, research meetings and conferences. I think we were the only region that started with international research conferences where we invite known figures on education leadership from, for example, UK, Tony Bush, who wrote things about theories of educational leadership. We invited him to come and render a lecture during a conference like that, conducting training on research. We called it Research Clinic. So I invited people who are interested to become researchers to learn directly from me on some things that I have learned also when I was doing my PhD, and then participating in research conferences, providing support to researchers, implementing research-oriented initiatives and interventions. In fact, ang mga yabang namin, during my time, we did a research on learning-focused school leadership because I said school leadership should be focused on learning. So we put together a framework. The first phase was qualitative, so we gathered data from the representatives of the high-performing principals and teachers. And then we analyzed the data using my favorite approach for qualitative study, which is CQR, Consensual Qualitative Research. I invited superintendents to join me in analyzing the data, as I was also trying to provide them technical support. And then our paper was accepted at the European Conference on Education Research in Copenhagen, Denmark. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the city, but Ma'am Liling then agreed when I recommended that all the superintendents who are able to travel can join my co-researchers to present the paper. In fact, I did not go there. I don't have to be the one doing it. I allowed my ARD to join the team, and they were the ones who did that. The second phase was the quantitative phase. The ASDSS were the ones that were engaged in the research process, and they also went to Bolzano, Italy for the following year conference of the same organization. And then sustaining push for higher levels of SBM. I know, again, there's a recent guideline on how we can assess the levels of practice for school-based management, providing technical assistance, operationalizing the school governing council, empowering other teachers and stakeholders to make decisions that focus on improving outcomes, and taking part in school-to-school partnership activities. There was this program before, which I think is no longer being implemented now, where the high-performing schools were challenged to support and partner with a struggling school. So learning from one another with para mentoring, but at the school-to-school level. And then rendering reports, transparency boards are supposed to be updated and accurate, monitoring the liquidation of MOOE, holding financial management training, disseminating school report card, and maintaining up-to-date record of school financial transactions. And then optimizing ICT is more about providing more equipment so that classrooms can already have multimedia or ICT tools as part of the process, learning experiences of the children and learners, conducting summits, upscaling internet connectivity, encouraging online submissions of report, and operationalizing the ICT room for instructional purposes. And then the C is electricity. All of those are very self-explanatory, very simple practices. Aircon, faucets, supplies and materials that are of good quality, minimizing excessive travels, creating a committee that monitors the use of resources and conservation efforts. And then keeping schools' offices clean and eco-friendly is about disaster risk reduction, mitigation teams, clean and green program, fire extinguishers, because there are schools that actually get burned, suffer from this the fire hazard. So we have to make sure that they are there, implementing maintenance plans for equipment and facilities, and ensuring that minor repairs are undertaken properly. And then the results. In our region, when I joined them, we were at the bottom 5 in terms of the NAT ranking. When I left in 2019, we were in the top 5 best regions. We have this Facebook page of the T-Governance Advocates on FB with 31,000 members. We've been undefeated since the year I joined Calabarzon as champion in the National Schools Press Conference. We also recognized as exemplary implementer of Brigada Escuela. And of course, for research management, ASEC Roger would ask me, how come that in Calabarzon, we released the research, basic education research fund, after 2 weeks, you are already requesting for additional funds. The other regions would take ages before they could utilize the funds. I said, we've been able to come up with a very dynamic culture that is focused on research. I believe really that educators should be researchers. The researchers are more objective, objective when they look at things. They are not easily swayed by things that are not based on evidence. And then, so we have intensified the culture of research, more researchers presenting papers in research conferences, developing the LFSL framework that I mentioned about, and then we are able to produce a highly respected core of DepEd executives who are proactive, results-oriented, intelligent, network-building, credible, and empowering. Actually, I'll have more of that later. When we have a deep bench of successors for the third-level positions. When I joined them, we had to invite people from other regions to join us at the level of the executives, assistant superintendents, and higher. But right now, the bench is so deep. Calabarzon has an overflowing number of eligibles waiting to be assigned. And then just to check, after 6 years, I left Calabarzon in 2019. So when I was assigned to do this talk, I thought of asking, dalawa lang nakuha ko, 2 people who were there when we started this and who are now occupying, executive level positions. Sabi ng isang SDS from DepEd Calabarzon, the advocacy has been more than just a program for me. It has served as a guiding light in my journey as a learning leader. It has shaped the way I make decisions, strengthened my integrity, and ensured that my mission to serve learners remains at the forefront of everything I do. Exact word from that SDS. I promise him I would not name him, give him his name. And this SDS, when I first started going around Calabarzon as a new regional director, was guilty of the old practice. When I was about to leave the office where he was head, he wanted something very valuable put in my car. I said, you don't do that to Diosdado San Antonio. Can you just transport them to Yolanda? We were in the midst of supporting Yolanda victims. So I did not file a case for such a wrong practice. I just guided him because I knew that he had the potential, but I said, let's forget about this old practice. There have been instances when suppliers offered commissions in exchange for favors from our office. As an ambassador of T-governance, I ensure that my integrity remains intact by firmly making ethical decisions. So these words assure me that even 6 years after T-governance is no longer the mantra of the top officials, because I know that when a new leader comes, there would be new priorities. But when you go to schools, they still have the sculptors rack on their walls because they would say, we love the advocacy. It makes us more respected in a way in our communities. Another one who's a session now, initial member of the T-Governance Forum Organizing Committee, hired, but I won't mention the position because people who know that person will be able to identify. Sabi niya naman, the e-governance advocacy in DepEd Calabarzon provided me clear and measurable performance standards in my executive leadership journey, which are necessary to bring about transformational and meaningful impact to educational stakeholders. The Scouters Rack furnished behavioral indicators in my leadership and management roles, which aim among the people under my care to the importance of proactive, strategic, and compassionate measures in championing daily grind. The governance advocacy also inculcated in me the necessity of living servant leadership inside and outside the workplace. Consistency of positive character and deep commitment is key. And this, I believe, is my legacy. So what else? According to them, hindrances. What are holding people from sustaining advocacy for transparency, ethics, and accountability in DepEd? Limited resources could challenge school principals to do shortcuts. Deeply rooted cultural and systemic traditions or massive complexity of DepEd work and the internal politics that goes with it. It's really a very complex organization. Resistance to change, conflicting interests and external pressures, limited awareness and appreciation of key principles, and hesitance in consistently enforcing accountability standards. And then, how do we address? What I asked them, how can we address those challenges? Mentoring and training initiatives, demonstrating the values in action. So making sure that the way you actually live is anchored on the 12 things a governance ambassador or advocate should be. Establishing clear guidelines, structures, mechanisms, and tools to proactive measures this advocacy promotes must be translated into policy and or operational guidelines. So I know DepEd has guidelines, but they are not really all about governance. Honoring schools and leaders who employ governance values through a recognition and incentive system. We had that during my time. We had the governance ambassadors. We recognized them at the end during our governance fora. Offering coaching, guidance, and encouragement, establishing strong communication channels, integrating the advocacy into school policies, district programs, and performance appraisal system, and strengthening partnerships. The next part is, as I've said, my acronym for my ideal leader is PRINCE. So this is another acronym, Dr. Maha. But but it makes me very, it allows me to remember my ideal leader using 6 words. Proactive, meaning you don't wait for people to tell you what to do. Just when you believe that something is worth doing, do it. And then results orientation is clarifying what you want to accomplish. Intelligence is not really necessarily having a high IQ, but it's more about EQ, being able to understand yourself very well and being able to be an instrument of harmony in organization. So self-smart and people-smart. Yan yung intelligence natin yan. Network building is very clear. All of us survive and thrive when we have networks. Credibility is very important. The things we say are expected to be matched by our actions. And empowering, what I tell my team, starting out when I was a principal, is the first time, your first priority when you get assigned as a leader is to look for your successor. If you fail to identify and train your successor, you will, as far as I am concerned, you are a failure. And of course, I brag that many of the regional directors now, I think in my count, 5 of them currently are all grown in Calabarzon. And of course, in the school where I was principal, more than 10 teachers became principals or are principals now. So those are my sources of fulfillment when they would occasionally tell me that the push that I did for them is now producing positive outcomes. But I said, the prince should create a riot that does not, create mess or chaos. This riot is actually the elements of invitational leadership I learned in APLP while I was in Hawaii for like 5 months. But I reconfigured the elements so it's easier to remember. Riot is respect for others. Intentions, everything we do should not be about ourselves, but about the interests of the organization. Optimistic in perspective that with every effort, there would be positive results after that. And trustful of colleagues I always claim that I trust people first before they prove that they are not worthy of my trust. So I don't listen to people when I join an organization as superintendent, as regional director. Normally, may mga sip-sip dyan. I-whisper, wag mag-ingat ka dyan, ganito. I avoid, I start with everybody on a clean slate until they prove to me that they are not worthy of my trust. Anyway, so these competencies for leaders, Prince, are actually somehow aligned, but it is perfectly aligned with the SES board competencies for career executive service officials. Like the pro-action for SES board is leading in a continuously changing environment. Results orientation is planning and organizing for greater impact. Intelligence is strategic and critical thinking. Network building is linkaging and networking. Credibility is driving performance in integrity and service, for integrity and service. And empowerment is developing others to establish collective accountability for results. But the other writers, scholars also are somehow saying the same competencies that leaders should possess. And I also recently found this on Facebook from Alvin Wang, who said that everyone wants the top floor, you build what holds it up. So most now, according to Wang, is these are promotions, recognition, decisions, speaking opportunities, etc. And then we do this daily execution, one-on-ones with team members, giving feedback, etc. But what's important is the hidden work, which I have highlighted here, that for leaders, and I think this is what we are able to do as a collective leaders in Calabarzon. We were so self-aware. We knew our limits, we knew our imperfections, we recognized them. But because personally, I feel that if you're not aware about what's wrong with you, you'll not end up improving. Emotional regulation, personal discipline, values alignment, continuous learning, boundaries, listening deeply, humility, they are things that are not sin, but they carry all the weight for us to be successful leaders. And the next one, I think this is the last authority from Antonio Grasco on building autonomy. So for transparency, ethics, and accountability to be strong, sabi niya, leadership that creates autonomy builds stronger teams because it replaces control with trust, direction with dialogue, mistakes with learning, allowing people to act with purpose and grow in confidence. So in Calabarzon, we tried very hard to make sure that the decisions are shared with our team. We give tasks that leave space for initiative. When I was, my mantra as a leader, so that I would not be overwhelmed by so many things to do, I just define what should be produced, how it's going to be delivered. I allow the professionals to take charge. That's how I survived the office of the Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction. The first few weeks was overwhelming until I realized I was working with directors of the different bureaus who were the ones on top also of making sure that the delivery of all their mandates are accomplished. So what I just did was to clarify, these are the things we will do. How you are going to do it, bahala na kayo dyan. Trust judgment without micromanaging, offer guidance while allowing feedback, freedom to act, recognizing creativity in problem solving, treating mistakes as opportunities to grow. I always, and the moments I realized people felt I was a leader was the moments when I said, I'm sorry, this was a wrong decision I made. So I had that courage to take the blame just to save the morale of the team. Make knowledge accessible to everyone, welcome and credit team ideas. And the main ideas of my talk has been published at the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies, edited by Dr. Ocampo, and that was the title. But essentially, this is the Facebook page with 31.5 members. And concluding comments: present-day educators are facing chaotic situations that need to be managed. TE can be fostered via simple and concrete practices. You don't have to come up with very complicated systems. Leaders wishing to succeed in fostering TE need to consider tactics that inspire organizational members. If you ask me, the most important role of the leader is to inspire. Changing the organizational culture is not easy, of course, but collaborative approaches in identifying priorities for organizational change foster a sense of ownership that engenders deeper commitment from the staff. And because once they provide their input, they own the ideas. I don't care if the staff would no longer acknowledge it as my own, as long as my idea of improved, better outcomes is accomplished. Transforming organizational members from being traditional gatekeepers of the organizational culture into passionate advocates for sustained change is a crucial indicator of successful and fulfilling leadership. Of course, that is what God has given me. People who would send me messages reminding me that I helped them. Hindi ko na maalala. But, or I inspired them to be better public servants as well. So, for the final slide, this is from Mahatma Gandhi, but I love this. All of us want to be happy. Sabi ni Mahatma Gandhi, it is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony, you'll be happy. So actually, when you match what you think with what you say, you end up being authentic. You can tell yourself, the things I'm saying are also in my mind. And the things matching your words and actions also make you more authentic and credible. So thank you very much. I have changed the email address because some of you may communicate with me after November 30. I'll no longer be able to use the dads@seameoinnotech.org. And that's my number, which has not been changed for a long, long time. Mabuhay po kayo. And thanks again, Director Maha, for the privilege of doing this talk on transparency, ethics, and accountability.